So in this week's episode, I am going to give you a small teaser of what's to come in our online epoxy masterclass. Yes, our masterclass is officially finished. It's 4 hours of footage going into detail and where I am going to teach you exactly all our methods and techniques we take in building all our tables. It's 4 hours of footage and you do not want to miss this one. And in this week's episode, I am going to show you exactly how to calculate epoxy. This exact video will also be in the masterclass. So by the time you are most probably watching this video, the masterclass might be live already. So I'm going to leave a link down in the description where I will leave all the details for this masterclass. Enjoy this week's video. To remove the bark and softwood of bark before we got the hand. How do you remove bark? Calculate epoxy. Now is 1.5 meter 5 15.04 divide that by 2 color consistency. The resin and you will curing time, maximum depth epoxy mold. Fits like a glove. A very good seal on our local CNC supplier. Mixing epoxy. Moisture content. Right into the core of the slab. Now you need to follow this technique. And this setting your wooden slab your mold. Pouring epoxy. Release agent your local, and you want to make sure you cover good. You get in removing the table from your mold. Sanding between layers. Get a grip because you're basically sanding grooves. You will not sand between the first and the second. So how do you actually calculate epoxy? This is a question we get all the time, is how do you calculate epoxy? Now, we need to calculate volume. How do you calculate volume? Volume gets calculated by length times width times height. That is going to give you the volume. But the tricky thing is that we are not sitting with a square table. We are sitting with a live edge table that's doing this. And how do you actually calculate the volume of the table? So before I'm going to do my calculations, you have to understand that where I'm from, we work in centimeters, millimeters, and meters. Now, I am absolutely not familiar with working in foot and inches. So I'm going to calculate this in the metrics that I know best, because I don't want to calculate in inches or foot, and then there's a calculation error, and then we don't want to be responsible for making you order 2 tons of epoxy for a small 1 meter by 1 meter coffee table. So I'm going to show you how to calculate the amount of epoxy in centimeters. So as I mentioned before, our slab now is 1.5 meters long, meaning it's 150 centimeters. And my height is 5.5 centimeters high. So we are going to measure every 100 mil. We're going to measure, and I'm going to show you why we do that now. So here's your first point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then the last one is 16. So you agree with me that we've got 16 points. We measured now 100 millimeters apart. So we got 16 points. Don't forget that 16. I'm going to show you now why we're going to use that 16. Okay, so now we're going to measure on each point. We're going to measure the width, and then we're going to write it down on the slab. So the first one is 15 centimeters. The second one is 10 centimeters. Third one is 14 centimeters. The third one is 20 centimeters. 19, 20, 23, 26, 24, 13, 15, 20, 28, 32, 32, 18. So now we got a estimate with every 100 mil going straight through the whole slab. Now we need to calculate all these together, and then we're going to get our amount. So now that we've got our 16 points and we calculated an estimate width in between all of them, now we're going to calculate all those measurements together, and we're going to get a total. I am going to put the measurements up on the screen so you can understand better what I'm trying to explain. So remember, we've got 16 points, 100 mils from each other. So we're going to take all these estimate points and calculate them together, and that amount is 329. So 329 divided by 16 points. Remember, we got 16 points. If you got a longer table, you're going to have more points. If you're going to have a smaller table, you're going to have less points. So it's 16 points. So it's 329 divided by 16, and that's going to give you an average width of 20.5. Now remember what I told you, calculating volume is length times width times height. Now we got our length of our table, which is 150 centimeters, times the average width we just calculated, which is 20.5 centimeters, times the height of 5.5 centimeters. Now, times all of that together, and we are getting a total of 16,913. Now, we need to convert volume into liters, and by doing that is dividing that amount by 1,000. And that's going to give you 16.913. Now, the next step is to convert your liters into kilogram, because the epoxy we are using gets calculated into kilograms. So by doing that is the epoxy we are using, the Crystal 100 and the Crystal 50 and the Woodcast 30, 1 liter is 1.1 kilograms. So your epoxy might be a different weight, and you need to get that specification from your supplier. So then you take 16.913 and you times that by the weight of your epoxy, which is 1.1 kilogram, and that's giving me a total of 18.60 kilograms of epoxy I'm going to use for this project. Now remember, we have to allow for wastage, and we normally add around about 10%, but for the sake of this project, we are going to use 18.6 kilograms of epoxy, so it makes sense just to make it 20 kilograms of epoxy. 20 kilograms of epoxy is what I'm going to need for my project. Now remember, we are casting in layers, and for this specific project, I'm going to cast 2 layers, meaning that I'm going to cast the first layer, which is 10 kilograms of epoxy, and the second layer is also going to be 10 kilograms. So, calculating that amount, the ratio we are using for our epoxy, we are going to use 100% resin and 33% of that is going to be the hardener. So we're going to take 20 kilograms and we're going to divide that by 1.33, and that's going to give me a total of 15.04 kilograms of resin I'm going to need totally for this project, because that 20 kilogram is your resin and your hardener together. Now you take 15.04 and you times that with 33%, and that's going to give you 4.96 kilograms of hardener. Now remember, we're going to cast 2 layers, taking 15.04, divide that by 2, and that's giving me a total of 7.52 kilograms of resin. And taking 4.96, divide that by 2, and that's 2.48 kilograms of hardener. And just to make sure, take 7.52 plus 2.48, that gives me a total of 10 kilograms of epoxy. So hopefully this calculation is going to help you in calculating the volume. Now I know a lot of epoxies gets calculated by liters, but the ones we are using gets calculated into kilograms. That's how we calculate the amount of epoxy we're going to need for this project. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video on how to calculate epoxy. This exact lesson will also be in the masterclass. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the bell button so you don't miss out when this masterclass will be going live. There will be a small fee to purchase the masterclass. We're basically selling all our knowledge on how to buy tables. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. I'll see you next week with another super cool video. Cheers.